Hey everyone, Jeff here from Films at Home, and I am so excited to share with you my picks for the top 10 4K discs of 2022. Hey everyone, so thanks for coming back to the channel today for this video. As I said, we've got my picks for the top 10 4K discs of 2022. Now, keep in mind, this is different than maybe the top 10 physical media releases of the year. There were many great Blu-ray releases that came out as well, but for this video, I'm specifically focusing on the 4K format, and I'm choosing my selections based on video quality, audio quality, but also packaging and special features, as well as some of the restoration efforts and the biggest differences between Blu-ray and 4K upgrades. So there's a lot of different factors that I took into this list, and it was a very tough list to make. 2022 was an amazing year for 4K discs, and I was even looking back at my midpoint 4K best of 2022 video that I did in June. I did that halfway through the year, and looking at that list, a lot of stuff from that list, which were great discs like Ambulance or The Northman, they didn't make this list here because there's so many other great discs that I thought deserved a spot, and they all came out in the second half of the year. It was a very strong second half of 2022 for 4K. So I'm not doing these in any particular order because honestly, all 10 of these are great, and to make one, number 1 versus number 5 versus number 7, it didn't make sense. So I'm just going to give you my top 10, no particular order, but we're going to kick off with one that I mistakenly left off my top 5 mid-year list, and that is Dune on 4K. Now you're probably saying this is a 2021 movie, and you would be correct, but it was actually released on 4K physical media in January of 2022. So almost a full year ago, which is why it may seem like an older movie, but Dune did come out in 2022, and it 100% deserves a spot on this list. This disc is a visual stunner, and it had excellent Atmos audio. Some of the sequences in this movie remain some of my demo sequences to show off my 4K system. They're just beautiful. And even though they have that sort of odd thing here where it was shot digitally, they added a little bit of artificial film grain, I still think it looks great. It's an absolutely amazing disc. I cannot wait for Dune Part 2, and it definitely deserves a spot on the top 10. It is a reference quality disc all the way around to show off your home theater. Plus, it's actually a great movie, which also helps. So now the next one on the list is a more recent release. This came from Lionsgate, but it is Reservoir Dogs. I reviewed this on the channel, and I absolutely loved this because of the restoration effort. The differences between the Blu-ray of Reservoir Dogs and this 4K release are huge. It was one of the biggest leaps in quality from Blu-ray to 4K that I have ever seen. It was an amazing restoration that was done by Lionsgate. It also has very cool packaging, including a very cool steelbook if you got that. Really cool, unique sort of slipcover artwork there. But overall, this release was just excellent. I mean, this is as good as this movie will probably ever look, and it was a much needed upgrade over a very poor Blu-ray release, which had been available for about 15 years at this point. So I was so happy to see Reservoir Dogs get that upgrade, and Pulp Fiction did as well, but I have to say Reservoir Dogs of the two is the standout disc from those two movies. It is an absolutely amazing restoration, and if you haven't seen this and you've only watched this movie on streaming or on Blu-ray or DVD, this is like watching it for the first time, and you absolutely have to own this movie on 4K. So next up on my list is a release from over in the UK from a company called Second Sight, and also one of my favorite horror movies of all time, and that is The Witch. Now, this is a 4K release of a movie that previously had a 4K release, but when Lionsgate put out their 4K release of The Witch soon after its theatrical release, it wasn't perfect. And the director didn't supervise the HDR. Robert Eggers did not supervise it, and he didn't like the way it looked. So he actually went back and redid a brand new transfer here for Second Sight, and they redid the HDR color grade. He reviewed it, and it looks so much better. So it's an interesting example of where a 4K disc can actually be upgraded with a little bit more effort and restoration efforts put into it from the director. And this is also an amazing box set. Second Sight has some of the coolest box sets of the year. They've been doing great releases. The artwork all around, really solid cardboard. Comes with this beautiful booklet as well, which is, I want to say, like a couple hundred pages long. 137 pages with essays and behind the scenes. I mean, just an overall amazing release, which certainly, adds to the fact that this was a top 10 of the year, but also the fact that they sort of corrected an improper 4K release, and having the director involved certainly made for a much better experience. If you thought this movie was too dark, didn't look well color graded on 4K or Blu-ray, this is the release to get. I really loved the revisions here that they made. It makes the movie look so much better, and this box set is just incredible. So if you can get your hands on it and you enjoy this movie, it's a must-have. Next up is another boutique horror movie. I guess maybe I'm a little biased because I do love the horror movie genre, although I've spread out the rest of these releases, but this one really stood out to me this year when I reviewed it, and it is from Vinegar Syndrome, and it is the Amityville Horror. This is the original. This is back before we had Amityville, like Refrigerator or whatever movies they're making now. They've made a million Amityville movies, and the name has sort of been watered down. But the original Amityville Horror is one of horror genre's most classic movies. It is one of the best movies. It has great performances. And Vinegar Syndrome not only has this beautiful artwork where they give you this nice slip cover, they do the whole 9 yards with special features, it's loaded with all of that, but they also went back to the original camera negative, they rescanned it at 4K, they added in HDR, and it is a breathtakingly beautiful presentation, exactly what you'd want from a movie of this era, shot on film. It just looks incredible. So if you're into horror and you like Vinegar Syndrome releases, or you just want to own the Amityville Horror, this is another massive upgrade from what was previously available out there. Vinegar Syndrome outdid themselves with this release. They also added multiple audio tracks, so you can go through those, and there's a ton of special features with commentaries and interviews with the composers and interviews with like James Brolin, all kinds of stuff on it. But I just love the quality of their releases, the slip covers, everything about it. And I should say another honorable mention to this list for sure was their release of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, which also has a beautiful release, amazing packaging, and a new 4K scan. I almost included that one. It's probably a very close, it's in a top 15, I would say. So if you like Vinegar Syndrome and horror, check out Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. But Amityville Horror, I think, was their best of the year, and it was super impressive to me, and it's a must-own for horror movie fans. And if you like good 4K restorations, you'll love this disc. So next up is probably a pretty obvious pick for anybody who's been paying attention to movies in general, 4K media, any of that stuff. But of course, Top Gun Maverick has to make a top 10 list for the year. In fact, it's probably a top 10 4K disc of all time to this point in the format. The IMAX scenes in this are breathtaking. The fact that they used so many practical effects and that these guys and girls were actually in the planes filming while they were doing these stunts, it's just an incredible visual experience, never mind how great the 4K and IMAX scenes are. The HDR adds another punch, and it has probably the best Atmos soundtrack that I've heard to date. I haven't had a movie that worked out my sound system as much as Top Gun Maverick did. There are several sequences in this movie where your home theater system is going to be buzzing. From the lower end, your subwoofer is going to be cranking. It has so many cool surround effects. Everything just sounds amazing, looks amazing. It is easily one of the best looking movies that's ever been made, and certainly one of the most ambitious movies with the effects and what they did with practical effects and actually having these people in the air. But it's just a beautiful 4K disc and really demo quality material. If you're thinking about upgrading to 4K in 2023, this should be one of the first discs you buy. It'll really blow you away. So next up on this list is a movie I actually bought very recently and wasn't sure what to think of it. Didn't really think much. I thought, I don't own the movie. I might as well buy it on 4K. I'd never seen it before. And it absolutely blew me away when I saw how good the quality was. And that is Coraline from Shout Factory. Now, this is a Leica Studios stop motion movie. So they actually put out Paranorman and Coraline on 4K. I need to check out Paranorman. I've heard that easily could have made a top 10 as well. But I got Coraline first because I didn't own the movie on any format and I'd never seen it. And let me tell you, stop motion animation looks incredible in 4K. It's so detailed because it is literally this practical stop motion effects. Like there isn't, any sort of rendering. It's stop motion. It's a practical effect throughout the whole movie, which looks fantastic. And the colors in this also unbelievable HDR and color in this movie. If you want something that's really going to work out your TV and get that full HDR color gamut, Coraline is super impressive, all the way from just like contrast and your super deep blacks, but there's so many amazing purples and blues and reds and greens throughout this movie. I loved it. It was one of the coolest movies that I've watched since I bought my OLED TV. And if you have a TV like at that high a level, you're going to be super, super impressed with this disc. And it's just an amazing restoration here from Shout Factory. It has tons of special features, and don't sleep on the Atmos mix that comes with this. It's got full Dolby Atmos, and it sounds just about as good as any release I heard this year. There are so many dynamic effects, and it's such a dynamic soundtrack, and Atmos just takes that to the next level. So I would highly, highly recommend Coraline from Shout Factory. Now, of course, no 2022 top 10 list would be complete without this movie, and that is The Batman. Now, there are obviously a lot of ways to watch this movie. You could watch it on Blu-ray, DVD, 4K. You could watch a 4K stream on HBO Max. I saw this movie in theaters, and I will tell you that nothing that I've watched other than the 4K has replicated the theatrical experience. The Blu-ray doesn't have enough color depth. It doesn't have enough. The HDR really helps this movie because it is fairly dark. There's a lot of deep black scenes, and there's a lot of contrast against these black scenes, and it also has an incredible Atmos audio track. So this release here, it's one that's very popular, and you certainly could watch it any way you want. But if you watch it on HBO Max, if you watch it on Blu-ray or DVD, you're selling yourself short, I think, in my opinion. It's a beautiful 4K image, but you really need that true 4K resolution. You need the high bit rate of a 4K disc, and you need HDR. Otherwise, the movie can look a little muddy. It can look, almost too dark. You're going to be missing out on what is a great experience. And this is one of those discs that, is it the most impressive technical 4K disc ever? No, but it makes the list because, in my opinion, it's the only way you should watch this movie, which is what makes this 4K disc so great. It blows away any other method of watching this movie because 4K does such a great job. So I highly, highly recommend it if you haven't bought it yet. It's the best way to see the Batman. Now, the next one on the list is from the Criterion Collection, and I was very excited because in 2022, the Criterion Collection finally joined the world of 4K, and they had many great releases. The Last Waltz was really cool. Raging Bull, The Red Shoes, which actually came out in 2021 towards the end of the year. But 2022 was a big year for them. They put out a lot of really cool stuff. Malcolm X was another one, and they have lots of great stuff coming to 4K throughout the next, several months and hopefully into next year. But one that really stood out to me was a film noir from the 40s. And I picked this one because I love the way black and white movies look on 4K. And it's Double Indemnity. Now, the movie here was fully restored in 4K with Dolby Vision HDR, and it's stunning. There are many black and white movies that I found to be super impressive on 4K. This is one of them. Some Like It Hot. It's a Wonderful Life. There's so many great examples. Psycho. It really does wonders for black and white, especially with HDR. That deeper contrast. It makes all the difference when you literally only have a movie that's working within the grayscale from black to white. And your whites are brighter, your blacks are deeper, everything in between looks a lot better. But I just loved the restoration here as well, and I have to give props for Criterion for this release because not only did they fully restore it in 4K with Dolby Vision, they have the original uncompressed mono soundtrack, but they have two Blu-ray discs here. One has the film and one has special features, and it has commentaries, new interviews, new conversations with film historians. It's got a 1992 short film documentary on here, a couple of documentaries actually. It's got radio adaptations. It has the trailer. I mean, everything you'd want to own that has anything to do with Double Indemnity is on this release, and it's also beautiful. It's a beautiful picture. It's a really cool movie. Definitely one of the better film noirs from the 40s. So I highly recommend the movie. I highly recommend the Criterion 4K, and if you really want to dive in, they have amazing special features as well, which is why I chose this one for the top 10. Although I will say they had many that could have been honorable mentions, and probably are honorable mentions, like A Raging Bull, Malcolm X, The Last Waltz. They're doing a great job with 4K. So definitely start to check their stuff out if you haven't yet. And now for the last spot in my top 10. This could have gone to a lot of movies. I've mentioned some that are honorable mentions, but I had to include this set. And this is a set. This is a trilogy. And I think it's one of the finest examples of film restoration work and the power of 4K and HDR and what that can do to really bring a movie back to life and back to a director's original vision that he or she wanted when they originally shot the movie. And that is going to be The Godfather. Now, I have the big 50th anniversary set here, which includes all 3 of the movies, has a very cool booklet and amazing packaging. I display this behind me in most videos. But The Godfather restoration is an amazing example of going back and working with the director and trying to attain that original vision that they had in their heads that now 4K and HDR technology can truly give them. And I actually have a great interview on my channel with James McCoskey, who works for American Zoetrope, which is the company that Francis Ford Coppola owns and has done restorations of many of his films. And if you want to learn more about the Godfather restoration, go check out that podcast interview. But they went back and did a ton of work on Godfather, Godfather Part 2, even Godfather Part 3, and introduced Godfather Coda, which is the sort of revisited Part 3 into physical media. So the way that this movie looks, I mean, it's just night and day, and I have a full review on it. But The Godfather, it's one of the greatest movies of all time, and now has one of the greatest 4K discs of all time, which it desperately deserved. And even though the Blu-ray restoration from a few years back was also amazing, there's something else that happened here with 4K and HDR. They realized and pushed the limits of that technology and just gave us one of the best looking examples, especially of a movie that is now 50 years old, on 4K that I've ever seen. So I highly, highly recommend the movies, of course, even Part 3. And the 4K discs are must-owns for 4K collectors. And from that time period, I don't know that there's a better looking 4K disc than The Godfather. So that is my list. That's the top 10 4K discs of 2022. And I know there are many out there that I left off for different reasons. I had to make some decisions. You have to cut it down to 10, which is always very hard to do. There's also some discs I just haven't seen. You know, I have not seen every 4K disc. You know, you'd think I would, but it's not the reality of life. I haven't seen them all. I don't own them all. I haven't had a chance to buy them all yet. So, you know, I'm working through a list, and I definitely have a backlog. And there was great stuff this year from Arrow Video, from Shout Factory, from Criterion, from Kino Lorber, from Vinegar Syndrome, from Severin, from Blue Underground. I mean, so many different labels did incredible work on the 4K format this year. And, you know, our budgets are only, you know, so tight, and we can only spend so much, and there's only so many movies you can really watch in a year. So, you know, if you guys have other recommendations in the comments, I'd love to hear them, because I was recommended Coraline by someone, and it's not a movie I would have ever thought to buy on 4K. They recommended it. I went out and bought it. It made my top 10 list because it blew me away. So I'd love to hear more recommendations or things you think I left off. And that's where we should have a friendly, healthy debate in the comments about what you think should have made it and what shouldn't. And if you guys do want to pick those up, I will leave links in the description for each one of them. If you buy them from Amazon, that helps support my channel. So I appreciate that. And as always, make sure you subscribe so you never miss a video. We had a great 2022. It was a great year for the channel. We had 100K subscribers. It was a great year for 4K. There's thousands of 4K discs out there now that are just amazing quality. I couldn't believe when I saw I have like 600 in my own collection. There are so many great 4K discs, and this is just a handful that I chose. So it's certainly not the end all be all to this year. Plenty out there. So go check out the format. If you have any questions on upgrading, I'm always here. But thank you for watching. Have a great rest of your day. Have a great holiday, and have a great rest of 2022. And here's to 2023. So stay safe and healthy out there, and I will talk to you all soon.